Hello and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1122nd New Social Environment. I'm Magley, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Odili Donald Odita and Dan Cameron. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Odili Donald Odita was born in Enugu, Nigeria, and lives and works in Philadelphia. Odita is an abstract painter exploring color both in the figurative historical context and a social political sense. Odita has exhibited nationally and internationally in museums and art institutions and is a professor in painting, drawing, and sculpture at the Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University. Odita is represented by David Kordansky Gallery, New York and Los Angeles, and Stevenson Gallery, Cape Town. And our host today, New York-based curator, art writer, and educator Dan Cameron, launched his career in 1982 with Extended Sensibilities at the New Museum, the first institutional effort in the U.S. to examine gay and lesbian identity in art. For over 40 years, Cameron has held senior curatorial positions at institutions across the U.S. In 2007, he founded Prospect New Orleans, the contemporary art triennial to benefit the city after Hurricane Katrina. More recently, his book on Nicole Eisenman's paintings was published in 2021 by Lynn Humphreys. And with that, I will hand it over to Dan to get us started.
Thank you so much, Magley. Welcome, everyone. I can't believe we're so far along in the new social environment talks, but it's clearly fulfilled a very important function. I'm personally very, very happy that today's guest is Odili Donald Odita. I have had the pleasure of knowing this man since he was a Bennington College student, which seems like a long time ago, but not that long before that, I also was a Bennington College student, and Bennington College was what brought us together. Uh, I just remembered the phone call from him asking if he could come and sort of do an internship working with me. And at that time, you went by Donald, and
Mhm.
I don't know why, but when I heard your last name, I decided you were Irish. I was
Oh,
just like, oh, it's Donald O'Kelly or Donald or Donald Odita. And then we met at Di Roberti's pastry and coffee shop on First
Robertis.
Avenue, the much missed
Yeah,
institution of the East Village. And we worked together for 3 years, I think. It was really kind of because then you finished and came back, uh,
right.
and we did a number of different projects. And I think I was able to segue effortlessly into working with you as an artist because we did an early exhibition together
Right.
in 1990, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, for me it's an honor to have this conversation with you. I don't know how Brooklyn Rail figured it out because it's you are essentially my first boss in New York City, moving there after graduate school. And I learned so much about the art world working with you and seeing so much in visiting artists and collecting information for you and going to the galleries. And I remember a question you asked me, why you're an artist, why do you want to work for me doing this? And I was like, well, who knows? One day I may write. I knew I said something to that effect. One day I may write, but my dad was an art historian, so it's like that's something about that sensibility within me. But I did eventually start writing a few years after leaving work with you, and and you helped me with that with writing recommendation at Flash Art. And I was writing for Flash Art, amongst other things, writing for NCOD, Journal of Contemporary African Art,
Right.
and art papers and a few other places. But it helped me to write, to help me to become a better artist because I was able to like essentially process my thoughts and think through them in a more systematic way, which helped me to think through my painting practice in a more systematic way to help me to understand what I was doing and what I was engaging. So, I'm thankful for that experience and exposure. Yeah.
Well, watching your career trajectory, of course, like everyone else, I've seen your exhibitions and your paintings, and I think that's how I first wrapped my own thoughts around your studio practice. But there was a fork in the path not that long ago,
Mhm.
um, when you began getting commissions. Um, I mean, in various places. One was the Venice Biennale, that I remember quite vividly. You had one at the New Orleans of Art for several years,
Mhm.
where you became a public artist. You became an artist who were bringing your vision into spaces where people didn't necessarily um, prepare themselves in a conventional way for an art experience. Now, if you're walking into MoMA, which people will be doing now for the next several months, they're going to
Right.
see work uh, before they see anything else. And before we go to the visuals on that, I wonder if you could just say a few words in general about your practice as a public artist, as opposed to someone who makes objects that get shown in galleries.
Right. That was something. It's always been something interesting to me, and I've always thought about it in this way. When I was a student at Ohio State University, I remember taking this class. My professor at the time was Richard Roth, and he uh, presented a video. I believe it might have been his class, but I saw a video of Christo and his wife working on um, I think it was the wrapped building or something of that sort. It was one of these things. It was a film where they had to go and talk with municipality, governors and business people and so forth. And I thought that was just super interesting. I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. And I realized for me it was this idea of getting other people to say yes, like having other people bringing this idea, this creative idea, you want to do something. I want to wrap a building or whatever he was wrapping, and saying like, let's all like agree on this together. Let's all make this feasible together, and let's all make this happen together. And so when I started doing these wall installations, it was sort of like that. Like I'm meeting people who I normally would not meet, uh, business executives and or like at the hospital, like the head administrator of the wing of this hospital responsible for all this sorts of stuff, or the CFO or whatnot. And I would say I want to make this beautiful wall painting, and I'm thinking about the hospital patients, or I'm thinking about in the courthouse, I'm thinking about you know, your clients that are all going to encounter and dealing with their bankruptcy, and I want to show how this is going to be have a positive effect in your space. And these are business people, administrators looking at me and going, yes, like yeah, let's see what we can do. And that to me is really one of the most exciting things I still encounter is meeting people like this. And I know like as a kid growing up, I was like, business guys and all that stuff was something I didn't want to have any part of it. I wanted to be an artist. And but the idea that I can share something and bring something to a table that these people that I think wouldn't want to talk about are going to talk about it. I think that that's still to this day amazing to me. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And you reminded me of something else, which I was going to segue immediately to the MoMA piece, but I want to ask you one more thing. In the mid 90s,
Mhm.
you and Oakley and Weezer found each other. I knew
Right.
you mentioned that you were publishing with NKI.
Mhm.
Um, and I I'm curious as to how that also shaped your idea about making art. In terms of the community in mind, because that's really what we're talking about when we're making work for a public that we don't know. We don't know
Mhm.
who these people are who are going to become charging through this space
Mhm.
in the future. And, Oakley is, one of the most brilliant theorists, and truly one of the great curators of all time. Um, and I'm curious about how your working relationship with him may have impacted the way you think about what you're doing today in public art projects.
Yeah, I mean, it was brilliant to meet him at that time. I mean, being a kid, being young like that, it was like meeting you when I met you and work with you. It was sort of like, you have these steps and stars that are in your constellation. You don't even realize the full breadth of what you're going to experience. But Scoto had introduced us, Scoto of Scoto Gallery, And he was actually in contact, Yokoi was in contact with my dad because he was enlisting historians and Africanists on his board for the magazine. So my dad was in conversation before I ever met him. And then, but I didn't know that. And then when we met, it was like I just knew he wanted to meet me actually because he wanted to get writers for reviews. He knew that I was working. I had already been working for Flash Art at that time, and he wanted to get my voice, and he knew that I was making work and saw that work, and he was excited by it because of this vision, this idea of contemporary African artists being seen in the mainstream in a mainstream way, not as the way you would see traditional African art or the way it's relegated to a sideline, but this conversation that's happening on a current plateau. And it was, in a way, like extension of stuff happening elsewhere. Revue Noir was already happening in Paris.
Paris.
And there are other magazines that I'm really not aware of that will probably happen at the same time, even let's say Latin America. But the thing is that we were I had this feeling that we were at the center of something that I understood because I was born in this space as a Nigerian and as an African. I was born in that space, and I understood what it meant to be to have your culture put backstage or put to the side and not taken seriously. And this was an opportunity for us to be able to do that at the highest level. I'm talking about like total cultural capital, like understanding positioning, understanding language, understanding idea and theory, and going right out there and doing it. And that was really just exciting. And I was caught up in that mix by being there and swept up by accident, in a sense, you know?
Well, maybe not so much of an accident. I mean,
Yeah.
since you're both Nigerian in a way, and there was
Yeah.
definitely a kind of a fusion of
Right.
ideas at that time. But I'll just say, as a curator, I was lucky enough to go to Johannesburg Biennial
And
number
I
two,
saw you there. I remember seeing you there.
1997,
Yes.
and that is a keystone moment in my life. I was like, oh my God, people actually can make an exhibition that's this full, that's this, developed, and in a way also kind of radical. You know,
Yeah, it was
he
this.
Yeah, he covered all the grounds. It was thought provoking. It was spectacular in just sensorial terms, and it was unrelentingly political. And I think that's just sort of something I've carried with me since then. Like that's the high mark. It's very rare when anyone can ever achieve what he did with that show.
I think it was great show and I remember seeing you there. It was really brilliant to see the entire art world, in essence, stand there, be there, and see all the different venues and see this work there. And there was something so new about it. I mean, in a way, it's become the standard, right? But in '97, to be there and to see all these people and to understand that these conversations were not taken as some kind of like a token conversation or some kind of let's put it on the menu sort of
Right.
manner, but really deep-seated and wholehearted, from the artists to the curators to the writers to the intellectuals, everybody flying in. And I'm talking the entire art world for 2 weeks was in one spot. And then we flew down to Cape Town from Joburg as well.
Mhm.
But it was really brilliant. And to see uh it was almost like a night and day switch for me to watch Oakley transform in that position because he absorbed it. I mean, I knew Oakley like we would have dinners and hang out every day and talk about stuff and go, it's just everything, right? And then all of a sudden it's just like boom,
To me,
public international figure, and Documenta was next for him. Yeah. Yeah.
well, I think that's a perfect segue now because I think what we're going to see in your MoMA commission is, in a way, a steady line from that moment. Um,
Mhm.
this kind of transfer of a certain knowledge and a certain visual experience
Mhm.
into a public space. For people who haven't seen it, can you talk a little bit about how this happened? I heard a little the other day, and I thought it was a great story.
I mean, I was approached by Smooth and Zewi, Ugochukwu Smooth and Zewi, curator at the Museum of Modern Art. He said that there was a potential of doing a wall at MoMA, and this is in December 2023. He came to me and I visited him there, and he said, possibly do a wall in in the museum. And then in a subsequent meeting, Sarah Suzuki came in and said, "What about the columns?" And with that suggestion, it opened up the door for so much more.
So was that
And
the original wall, and were those the original columns?
well, no, no, did not.
Yeah.
The wall is the other wall in front of the first floor bookstore that goes down to the down below the ground, right there, that
Right.
west wall. And it was then she pointed up to those columns in front of the store, which we never did actually, because it would have, I think at the end, it would have pulled the installation in a different direction and brought other things to attention that didn't need to be brought into the focus. But uh, we were able then to point to the Warhol walls with the cows, and I do like those walls. The wall above, and then the large wall going to the front at 53rd Street. And I was like, wow, is that a possibility? Because yes, I think that we might, you might take this down. We'll plan to take this down and move over to this space. And I was like, oh my, inside I'm like, oh my God. And so during the conversation, there's a lot of different dates, a lot of different timelines. I was saying yes to everything when I knew it was impossible, or when it was like, oh my God, it's so far away that they might cancel this project. But it was really, it kind of, at a certain point, it kind of came very fast with all the different possibilities. And to step back from that is to think that, wow, this museum was really open to this alteration of their lobby space in a way which is going to be very tremendous and very like they're going to invest in this. And I was like, wow, like, look at this, look
Oh,
at,
it's a big commitment on their part, and you're
yeah,
just warming up. I mean, this isn't even half of the space that you
yeah.
eventually filled in, right?
Yeah. So it was really, they know their museum. I mean, I walked through with all the curators at one point, and we were deciding, I was pitching my ideas of what I wanted to do in this column and that column, how I was seeing the vision of the intersection between 53rd and 54th as a kind of almost like seascape, or a kind of like a travel scape. So there's this idea of the traveler or the immigrant is in my narrative with the construction of this install, a kind of coming to and landing in a promised land. And on the same instance, it's sort of like I'm looking at the museum itself as a repository of those coming from outside, as a sanctuary, a place where people can come together from different positions of life, different attitudes and minds of life, to look at art together and have a discussion about what they see and come to some form of agreement in that discussion, not necessarily a singular vision. Because if you're going to a museum with a friend, you might look at something and see it one way, and they may see it another way, but you come to a place where you can accept what is being put forth and under consideration. And so,
So do you
like,
actually
yeah,
literally, sorry to interrupt you, do you think of them as a meeting point, as a place to gather, or where paths cross?
museums, museums.
No, this space right now, the
Yeah,
as you design a space that's enveloping a small multitude of people.
absolutely. I mean, it's like a very meta level narrative that's happening here. The idea of this individual, this immigrant, this traveler going through this space and transforming, in as much as the viewer themselves in this space having a transformation. The music that I have as the titles of the work is part of the transformation, another layer of experiencing change as you travel through a space with the consideration of the realities that exist in the world. The title Songs from Life is really important to me, because I want people to understand that abstraction is not just abstraction. It's not just abstraction for abstraction's sake. It's not just a continuation of abstract history or Western history or whatever that you might see it as. It is those things, but it's also coming from real life. And that's why I wanted to term songs as a parallel to art, or as a parallel to abstraction from life, art from life, songs from life because this is the inspiration for the work here.
Well, I'm also thinking about the very different coloring patterns that you're working with now.
Hmm.
Uh, and when you say that abstraction isn't just abstraction, I kind of want to literalize that a little bit and ask you about sources.
Hmm.
I know you make everything, you design everything, you create everything, but you're inspired, obviously, by a wide range of art making
Hmm.
uh, through history and across the world.
Hmm. Hmm. I
Can
mean, I could
I was
in this
Yeah.
image right here, I can talk like for me this is the long wall that we see here from the 54th Street entrance exit is called I call it wall 4.
Hmm.
And the short wall next to it, perpendicular, is wall 5. And the last wall 6, is the wall that has the broken net like pattern on it.
That was all the
And
white with
yes,
all.
with the white there, exactly. Now, there are songs associated with these walls. This wall 4, the song is This Land Is Your Land
Hmm.
by Woody Guthrie, and then slash A Forest by The Cure. Okay. So this is like in a way like on one hand I was thinking about it's parallel to the garden space at MoMA, so I wanted to draw upon certain color that could be associative of a garden.
Hmm.
At the same instance, I was thinking about a forest, but you see, I don't want to literalize and like have trees and like, apples in a tree. Like it's nothing like that, but it's this idea of closure or idea of light and shadow, an idea of light going through spaces or filtering through a space. So this long space is that forest, that landscape. And then the song itself, when you hear the song and listen to these songs, it's to kind of give you another allusion to understanding of what that space could be. Like this land is your land. And this is the kind of toward the end point or toward the end of process point for this traveler that comes from 53rd Street into this space back to 54th Street to confront this place that says this land is your land, this and then a forest. And culturally, like in Nigerian culture and African culture, and in the West, uh, narratively, a forest is always a place of some kind of turmoil or stress, or the idea of being lost in it, or dangers can happen in a forest. And so there's the metaphor for this land is your land, and then a forest. And then wall 5 has the song titles. It starts with Youth Against Fascism by Sonic Youth, and
Hmm.
then Think by Aretha Franklin,
There we
and
go.
then For What It's Worth, a Stephen Stills song
Oh, sure.
sung by Miriam Makeba. And then, and then the last word of the last phrasing of the title of Wall 6 is is Lovely Day by Bill Withers. Okay. So, and then that song, Bill Withers, such a beautiful song. For me, I wanted it to be ironic because this is the dark half of the forest. This is where the forest becomes kind of dangerous in my narrative or my play of what the walls are doing. So from Youth Against Fascism, which is very strong lyrically, a song from 1992, speaking towards this idea of fascism all the way to Lovely Day. And I have to say that with the formations of this work was made throughout the entirety of 2024. And a lot happened in 2024
Sure did.
that's being felt in 2025 and for the next 3.5 years. Okay. So it's like thinking about this wall, and when I made it, it was roughly, I mean, the titling was roughly coming around no, October, November. So I'm thinking a lot about these things in this piece and the effects of what it means to be in the world. So the last wall 6, is kind of like it starts with the song Teardrop by uh, Massive Attack.
Hmm.
And then it's Do It Good, Bill Withers. And then the last song is Brand New Day uh, by Annie Lennox and Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics.
Hmm.
And there, I love the idea of the poetic and of having something that um, evaporates in the wind, like ashes, let's say, or like the idea of flowers that can just blow away. But there's something about the remnants or the idea of its presence as being beautiful, and that's what that the wall painting series of the wall paintings ends in that way with this brand new day and this idea of not being being hurt but not being broken.
Got it. And what are we looking at now? Is this earlier in the series?
Yes, this is earlier in the series. This is wall one and wall two, going from left to right. Wall one here is the wall that when walked through with Glenn Lowry, he said this wall should be used. We should use this wall. And at first, I was a little uncomfortable with that wall because of the way in which the guests come in. I was looking at this place again with nothing but the white and seeing a crowd of people at MoMA walking through the space. So all of a sudden I realized after some moment that that was really an amazing selection and a great choice because the other wall, which is the opposite side of this wall, the wall that Andy Warhol's work extended on, I called that wall the endless exhale because it's so long and it's so long. It basically anything that I would have put on that wall would have done what was happening to the Warhol on that wall. It was losing energy because the wall was just simply too long. And so it's amazing to confront situations where like an artist's dream, you're like, oh, you can have this huge space to do anything you want. And and I said yes at first until I actually looked at the wall to think about it and actually position some things in my mock-up of the space to realize that there's a certain the walls connect, they kind of touch, but there might be a failure in having something go from one perpendicular situation to that long wall in a ways and that I saw would be just not fruitful. And this wall in particular, what's just beautiful about it, it becomes a square that echoes the square of the glass that we see there. And then the rectilinear element that's that window with the white element under it becomes the vertical to the horizontal wall that's the wall two or the canopy wall that I call it going across. So I started to see in my design work this beautiful situation that the museum has in its design and the way in which windows and walls and verticals and horizontals work with each other. And the meaning of that design on that wall is to act as a compression, space of compression, just like the people entering, like say, going through passport control or going through an immigration line where they have to enter and show as they do, they're showing their purses and opening them up, their bags, and showing maybe ID as they walk in to into this uh, potential sanctuary space of the museum.
Now, I notice you have a completely different compositional structure to each wall.
Mhm.
I mean, since they're very different walls, that's logical. But how did you develop this kind of separate design identity for each wall?
Well, I mean, I've experienced over the years of doing the installations, I've experienced a way in which, let's say, compositional actual drawing, I want up the space so that the experience becomes interesting as you go through it and not numbing. A long time ago, I learned spending time looking at tiles, spending a little bit of time in Italy, seeing these beautiful floor tiles, realizing that the mind stops thinking when you realize the end of the tile and the next pattern is a continuation of the pattern, which makes it an all over pattern, but that once you understand how it's made, the brain stops the magic. And so I'm trying to always push the mind and the spirit further by trying to set something up against something else, one thing up against something else to create um, um, uh, fissure and power. And so if fullness to emptiness, or if it's a big to small, or however, vertical or horizontal, those are things that I'm always engaging all the time in the design work to just energize the space and motivate contemplation because I really believe that these designs, these drawings are to be read, not like abstraction in the sense of just, oh, it's color and light, but like to be read and felt and understood in ways that are, let's say ultimately outside language, even if based in language.
Yeah, I mean, it really does seem to be a language. There seems to be um, the non-repetitive part, what you're doing, that you think things repeat, but then when you compare them, they're different.
Hmm.
That seems to be almost like the natural evolution of language, where you
Hmm.
use words differently each time, where you use
Hmm.
different variations on a word.
Hmm.
Uh, and it feels linguistic, even though um, um, were you saying it's not language, or that you don't really see it as language per se?
But it is it's like say a vocabulary that I'm inventing and so forth, and I'm inventing by taking from other sources and making my own thing out of it. But the thing is that for me, it's like I think everything is language based, but it's how we draw from it or how the abilities be able to draw from it and create something new, I think is also part of reality or part of potential in life that we can take things that are set in stone, institutionalized, and make them into something new, but that takes a lot of energy and a lot of um, I guess it's a lot of knowledge and a lot of energy to be able to surmount what we already know as truth uh, um, as a collective in society, let's say. I hope that that makes sense, what I just said.
No, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the color too. I've noticed your palette has gotten even more um, intense. That's not a very exacting word, but you're pushing the sort of the chromatic possibilities of your palette even more than in some of the paintings, I think.
Okay, yeah, and it's really that's really important, and this could help answer the last question too, because see, for instance, that white that you see there,
Uh-huh.
is an important part of the construction of the composition of the columns. And that there are four sides. These are the square columns. This is the space of Babel, I would call it,
Mhm.
in the construction of the installation. There are four sides to this column. I basically it appears as if it's painted only three sides, but the fourth side is that plain white. And on the opposite side of that plain white is what we see in the very extreme far away column. You'll see that that's almost like painting pattern of horizontal skin tones or
Yeah,
horizontal
flesh.
desert tones, the
Yeah.
flesh tones. So that is the opposite side of that white
Uh-huh.
column. And so I wanted to have that kind of conceptual correlation with those two sides, those two facets. So let's say that is wall space position one of the four positions on a column. And then
Hmm.
position three is that reflection off of this white as a concept, as language, as structure, as ideation, and then this other ideation of skin tones that vary from a dark to a light, going in this different kind of array of things, array of colors. And then on position two and position four, I have flags on one side, flags of protest and affirmation, colors coming from these different flags on that side, which is, we can see it clearly on the very first column to the left, which is the biggest column of the three, those kind of
Uh-huh.
colors. And then in the furthest column, again, you'll see on the right hand sliver of it, colors that are more institutional, like colors of nations, of specific nations, as opposed to colors of protest on the other side facing it. So there's this like sides of a coin, opposite sides of a coin, let's say, or parallel, like this and that, constructing this space optically and constructively. And then the last thing is in the middle column, which I loved, and I didn't realize this, two things. The wood element of this space enhanced the intensity of the color as opposed to the whiteness of the rest of the museum space. And I didn't see that didn't know that that would happen, but it does. And it's really, really amazing to stand there and see that. And then I knew this would happen, but I didn't know it happened so well. The corners, when the walls meet, I wanted it to be like fractured glass, but what I didn't realize is it would be like these landscapes going from one into the other as if in a computer space. Like you're not necessarily understanding where one thing starts and where the next thing begins, but it's almost like being transported, like Doctor Who or something, from one time zone to another time zone in these multiple horizon lines.
Yeah, I mean the vertical lines that are separating the flag part from the flesh part
Yeah.
it makes the whole thing look virtual. You don't know what
Yes.
you're looking at. The depth
Yes.
completely looks like
Yes.
flip
Perfect
inside
word,
out.
virtual. It's totally awesome. And so like these are the kinds of things that I love to see in the work when I'm putting color and drawing together. Like I can map it out, I can plan it out, and I have to make a color composite for the institution who is commissioning because with so much money going into it, they need to know what they're going to get. But when you put the actual color on the wall in the space and the body comes in there, that's amazing. That's just amazing.
Everything changes.
Yes.
Um, I want to drill down a little. When you talk about the flag colors, I mean, we generally think of flags as like a collective identity for a nation. You know,
Hmm.
like it's a symbol of colors, and there's a collective body
Hmm.
behind that it references.
Hmm.
Um, and um, you want people to think flag, right? I mean, when they see that pattern, it doesn't matter. I
That's
mean,
that's
if
that's
there's
again
no
this.
specific nation to refer to, but
Yeah.
the idea of a flag is something that you want them to be thinking, even if it's only semi-consciously, in the same way that you'll recognize the skin tones as
Yes.
skin tones, even if you're not conscious of that realization.
Yes, and this is where language, the play of language comes in because in the sense of language, you can think, how can you make a, let's say it like this, how can you make a high heel shoe become a hammer, right? The high heel shoe is not a hammer, but the art, this is the power of art. Art has this ability to be able to transform things that we know as as a thing into something else.
Correct.
And it's quite incredible when you think about the that ability in art that it's like this is where freedom and art are so reconciled, because it's like I can this is where and I think now I feel like I'm under explained that question before earlier about
I love this
language.
photo, by the way. Sorry, just to
Yeah, this
linger
is
on.
good. This is where you see the virtual. I love your word, the virtual here. But it's
But
like
doing
it,
that,
yeah,
it's literally doing that right now,
yeah,
flipping
yeah,
inside out.
yeah, yeah. It's really crazy. But the thing is that art has this ability to be able to be transformed that way. It's like, how can I say that that's a flag? But somebody might feel that. I never told people that I was thinking skin tone when I was making that, but people look at those colors like, oh man, it feels like skin tone. I'm like, wow, this stuff can be read, and this stuff drawn from life called abstraction can be understood if and when people take the time to consider the combination of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, great. Is there more to the slideshow? I know we have I love this image.
Thank you. Yeah, this wall is called uh Immigrant Song slash Rofo Fight. So Immigrant Song is a great Led Zeppelin song.
Of course.
And to listen to the song, you're actually hearing some stuff that's very interesting about the idea of being an immigrant. And
Right.
then Rofo Fight is a song by Fela Anikulapo Kuti, and it's like and it's a song, it's pidgin English that means Rofo Fight is rough fight. And I was ideating that with the idea and struggle of being an immigrant or coming into a strange place or coming to a new place and the uncertainty, that the tumultuousness that happens in that can happen in that state of place. And so this wall is the drawing of the wall kind of mimics that or captures that idea of just like the intensity of and flurry of information, let's say the flurry of motion. And then the color is also exploring the body of the museum in the sense of that canopy space that's at the entrance and the glass that's at the entrance of the 53rd Street
That's
uh,
right.
produces this immense color that's when the wall is white and that thing is alone. There's an immense color and a range of colors that come from that glass and reflect off that canopy that I had to really deal with. I had to say, what am I going to put next to that thing that's going to even be justified, that's going to be able to be visible against that entryway? And this was really difficult to make this color and to have something composed in this way, but it's joyous for me to actually feel like I was able to do it. And there's multiple solutions, right? But this is my solution for the moment.
No, that's terrific. I have to go back to the palette a little bit. Maybe it's me, but I had seen the Orphism show at the
Yeah.
Guggenheim not long before this, shortly before this opened, and I was struck by I don't want to say the warmth, but this kind of art, use of color to articulate very precise sensations. I mean, your palette is much broader now, and there's a lot more variety to it. But I also was thinking about sort of these ideas driving abstraction movements of the early 20th century and the possibilities, that artists like the Delanays, or Kupka were ascribing to the possibility of just a shape that's a certain color juxtaposed against another shape and another color. And now it feels like 100 years later or more, that vocabulary has gone um, mega. It's you're realizing it at a completely different scale.
Right. I mean, I was blessed with the opportunity to, I know Carol Solowitz, wife, widow, and she invited me to a residency at her house in Priano, a family house in Priano. And so my family, we were there for about maybe 2 weeks, a week and a half. And so we were around Solowitz art, wall drawings and wall painting and stuff for the family in their family house. And I was looking at this painting he had on his wall every day, just every day. I had this opportunity, and I learned something quite significant about Italian painting or Renaissance painting, and it had to do with the color he had in this wall. And I'll say that it was a combination of intense colors with muted colors, or say primary colors with tertiary and secondary colors. And then it made me think about Leonardo da Vinci and all these paintings, and I started thinking about like, wow, the idea of the focal point and the idea of the subject is used in primary, defined in primary colors, and then other sorts of tertiaries and secondaries and tertiaries to define the secondary topic or secondary subject or secondary narrative, going back to the horizon line or the distance in the picture with the landscape in the back being the tertiaries, which is what Leonardo da Vinci was very well noted for. But it's like that was a mind blower to see that situation and realize how I can really start to push the way that space is that you play with deep space versus a Greenbergian understanding of the frontality and the objectness of a space, or the idea of not wanting to have things seem deep. But then why? Well, why? Like I can play in a space that is computer-like, that like the computer, the screen is plastic and flat, but the space can go 2,000 million miles into it. So,
Well, it also articulates it in a very different way than, say, two-point perspective, the
yes,
shaping the volume in an illusionistic way.
yes,
This is it's not illusionistic
yeah,
because you're not creating angles. You're using
yeah.
only the surfaces that are there.
I mean, I may be biased, but I feel like Cubism has more space than two-dimensional Renaissance space because of the nature of its construction. And then for me, Cubism and the computer are so closely related. The computer and the Cubism are like the same kind of mapping of space.
I also, since you're mentioning cubism, I do also like the idea that so much of early cubist collage is about taking detritus, taking
Yes.
cast-offs,
Yeah.
trash, things
Yeah.
with value or things with
Yeah.
a negative value.
Yeah, and I think of
Keeping of
suprematism and
whole and
constructivism and all of that in ways in which it's like this advancement of visual record and understanding and the idea of what space can be. It's amazing. I love Mirror's objects and Kurt Schwitter's and all that stuff. Data. I mean, it's amazing. When I think about that, it's just still so incredible to think about.
now, is this the time lapse here? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, it might be. I think so.
To play it, I have to go out of the slideshow, so give me one sec.
Sure. I think we've whetted the audience's appetite.
Right.
Now they want to see a movie.
It's a great movie.
It is a great movie. And I'm glad we didn't open up with it.
Yeah.
Here we go.
I want to say here that, the primary joy of these installations is that people get to see a painting made in real space. And so like I feel like I'm bringing the artist studio to the public so people can see how a space or a painting will transform as it's being made, decisions being made in along the way. And in very few installations I've changed the color. I mean, it's very rarely that I change a color. But we are dealing with the surface, which the support in painting language is called the support. Here it's the walls. And there are a lot of conditional things with the walls, like, oh, stuff is peeling off. You have to fix it. We have to adjust the way we're painting. We have to hide elements of the wall behind paint and work with the way the space is structured. So it becomes a problem that is like any painter's problem working in the studio. And I love that people get to see and have that particular aspect of objectness or
Now, you
painting
mentioned you had
experience.
three semi-autonomous teams work
Yes.
side by side, because one of the things that's true about a museum when it's open to the public is that you can't yell from one cherry picker to the other. You've got to respect the public, in the sense that you're not your work process is not supposed to intrude on their oral audio sorry experience of the museum. Was that a big challenge for you, to basically mean that every group had to work in relative silence?
It was one of the biggest challenges, and Jenna right there was mastermind at being able to program the schedule for our installation assistants. It was amazing because there were so many obstacles with the public, with the nature of work. This work that's done on this wall in particular, wall one, could be done in the daytime. That canopy wall, wall two that we are talking about, could only be done at night. And we had to plan it in a way in which the shapes were painted in a certain order. If we would have painted one or two shapes out of the process or out of the steps, it would have added 3 days to the work because of the way that these shapes are all touching each other. So we had to plan a map, make a map of the painting process. But part of it was that with the scale of the space going, this installation is spanning a city block, 53rd to 54th Street. So we had to split up this crew of six into three teams to be able to work on the major areas. And for example, we had one of the six assistants just pouring paint all day long. That was one of these rotating jobs. Another person would have to just like, maybe go around and make sure that tools are being brought around all day long. So it was this mammoth effort and working with the schedule because this museum is a giant engine and it's doing something almost literally almost 24 hours. Things are happening in that museum. So it's like we are going around the clock working around different programming, different events that are happening. Some days we had to stop working 3 days in a row because of an event they were having in the museum, setting up and taking down. That happened twice during our installation process.
And
So it was
you hadn't prepared for either event
we
to
we uh, we had to prepare. We had to
that.
prepare for all the events, and so we had multiple meetings with these installation teams at the museum and my installation team to coordinate everything together. And it was really watching acrobatic masters, these different teams to coordinate all of this so that we can get this done in deadline, on deadline. And to this day, I've been doing installs since 2007, since Venice, and I've never been late with any of these.
Man.
Yeah, we had to schedule. It's just amazing.
So I'm trying to ask, what day did you start, if you can still remember, and what day did you finish?
We essentially began February 20th
Uh-huh.
and uh, we ended April 1st.
Wow. So 6 weeks roughly.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing.
Painting at different times of the day, at night, having the night crew come in right after the museum closed to work all the way till 11. Yeah,
And it's up for a year. It'll be
it's up for 1 year.
up you through April 2026.
Yes.
Wow. This has been fantastic. Absolutely great. Now, I don't know if we've got some questions already. Um, I think I'm gonna maybe direct attention back over to um, to Min and to Magli, if we have some questions from looks like it's a pretty big group
We do
Mhm.
have quite a
participating.
few audience questions. First, thank you both so much. This was such a wonderful conversation.
Great.
The first question is from Ron Barron. Ron says, wonderful work. Can you describe your creative process with the creation of the MoMA installation? Did you create mock-ups, digital or scaled model? Do you follow a plan? Do you vary from that plan once you began to work on the actual piece?
Yeah. Could we go to the slides of me in the studio? Just to maybe that's going to be good. Yeah. So I'm here at the Joseph and Annie Albers Foundation in Bethany, Connecticut, and this was the final project phase for me to work on the drawings. I had called drawings from other drawings I had in my drawing collection of different shapes and patterns, brought them together, and we can go to the next slide. And you can see that this is just a small portion of the drawings coming together. I'm cutting, pasting, doing this kind of William Burroughs-esque kind of process of bringing things together. And next slide, please. And then here on the floor, and then the next slide, you can see that there's all these different considerations for the different stations in the museum. These were the drawings I showed to my curator, Smooth. And then after we got kind of a consensus on these drawings, I redrew all of them to make the final drawing that would be translated to my assistants and to everybody else, to my designer and to the museum to understand what I was doing. And then from there, I do a color. I go through 3,500 color chips, 3,500 color chips, Benjamin Moore color chips to find the colors, which came down to being, and this was the highest count ever for any installation I've made, 192 colors were used in this installation. I remember flying to the Fog Art Fair in San Francisco, the first, yeah, there, and beginning the color study, finding the colors, and then flying again to Glens Falls for my opening at the Hyde Collection to finalize the color selection for which became the 192 colors. And this is a big box of color chips that I'm traveling with, but it was like time was crunching, and I had to really uh, push the color and get it to this thing. And I can say one thing: the 192 colors in this space, they work on one, they're situated on one side, and then aspects of them repeat on the other side of 54th Street. And it's doing two things. First of all, the viewer doesn't see one and the other because their back is to one side or the other, so they're not experiencing things that might repeat in the physical way. But at the same instance, I have to kind of control the color because color creates this kind of pall or mood that can become the same or it can become distinctly um, an overly similar in a way in which it blands things. So it's color is amazing on so many levels to understand how to use it and how to engage it so that it still excites as much as it illuminates.
And here you're holding a model, a maquette of one of the pillars, one of the
Yes,
columns.
exactly. And that's how I understood doing that helped me to understand what I was going to do with the round columns because the round columns are essentially the same thing. It's if you can imagine I'm just going to pull out a piece of paper here, but if you can imagine like taking that and just like that's how I understood my mapping for the round columns because for the longest time, and I spent last summer going through, and I traveled a few places in Europe and elsewhere, looking at columns and going through books and reading columns because I didn't want to just, and I wanted to understand what a column was so that I can actually make something that's not decorative and only reinforcing the nature of a column, but actually enhancing it. And when I understood that this column could be figurative versus just only structural, and then I saw the great piece that Sengen Agudi did with Noah Purifoy, Noah Purifoy, the I think it's called Urban Fetes or the Street Fetes, this particular thing installation where they decorated the columns with these strings and elements wrapping around them that gave them a body orientation. I was like, that's where I want to go with this. Yeah.
Where is that piece, or is it no longer extant?
I
Do you know?
don't think it exists anymore. And I want to say they're called Freeway Fets. It's the piece is called Freeway Fets by Sengen Ngudi and Noah Purifoy. It's a beautiful image of their performance down there. And I think David Hammonds might have been at that performance as well.
Hmm.
But it's a classic image of early Sengen Ngudi work. And it just helped me to just because I was seeing columns all over these churches, beautiful columns, but all they were doing was just like reinforcing and decorative kind of is it re, reinforcements of the structural nature of column or the ascendant nature of a column, but as a structure. And I was like, I can't go that way. I can't go that way. I can't go that way until, thinking about transforming it into a body. And then that's what happens in the where the tall columns go up. They're kind of like it's an aspirational kind of force that goes up into the space. And in a way, you enter the second floor of the museum, or you experience the second floor of the museum that way. And you can look down from the second floor as well.
Brilliant.
Thank you for that answer, Odili. The next question is from Brielle Jean-Cola, and they say on the columns in the Babel section of the installation, the surprise of the virtual illusion on the corners feels very exciting. Do you anticipate trying to harness that illusion again in the future? Although your practice doesn't regularly have significant use of digital modalities, does making something read well digitally hold importance in your practice and how it's shared?
I mean, the digital is something that's super motivating for me since the beginning. I remember coming to New York and, the conversation in art school was cinema and the death of painting. But this is at the same time of learning programs like Photoshop 1 and Adobe Illustrator 1.1. I was doing early desktop publishing and not realizing what I was engaging. It was just like my way of making a living and keep, you know, paying the rent. But it was like the space of the computer became fascinating when I started to read theory about it and just understanding what it was. I mean, back then information was free was the model for technology and the computer, internet at that time. It's become something vastly different now. It's more outlaw. I personally think it's more outlaw and wastelandish than ever in the kinds of corruption that can occur in that space. But it's still something that I think of in the sense of its phenomenon, the sense of way it structures. You can structure things. My kid has played Minecraft when they were younger, and I love to see the idea of a space that has no light source other than what you can imagine. I mean, to me, that's just a fascinating consideration that what's light source versus this is what Al Held. I was like looking at those and thinking of like the space age Al Held paintings and realizing they're Italian paintings because they have all those paintings that he's made, beautiful as they are, have a light source. What about Minecraft? Minecraft has no light source, and that's super kind of interesting, I think.
Thank you for that answer. The next question is from Andy R. Andy asks, painting for the most part is a private act done in the studio. How did it feel painting live in front of an audience? Did it feel different than other mural projects you've accomplished because of the active space?
Well, definitely painting is a very private situation. And even now I have assistants in my studio, but I actually like to be there I like to be there when they're there. But I like to do creative things and thoughtful stuff by myself. It's still important for me to be by myself. It's also important for artists to know how you can get things from other people and to get let's say inspiration or affirmation of what you're doing, a certain kind of reconsideration, reanalysis of what you're doing. Like somebody can respond and say something or experience something in ways in which you might not have really understood in your own deepness. So I appreciate the public aspect of the work that engages that the installs engage. And it's just the nature of it. The installs are there. The private studio can be public when the person takes their work to show and to exhibition, and that becomes a public exhibitionist space. The installation, the nature of that it's made in public, it's immediately brought into this other realm where the private can exist, but it's more so a public one, a public engagement.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. Eileen Travel says, I remember at Bennington there was this ethereal feeling that your pigments could just fall off the paper. And I had the same feeling at MoMA, like in my imagination, the colors and forms can fall. Does this resonate at all with you? As Dan brought up the virtual, I just feel like this goes far back in your history and work, and I love it so much.
Thank you, Eileen. I think that definitely we have the consideration of material and material condition and space, like a painting on canvas, a painting on wood, a painting with pigment on paper that I used to do at Bennington, um, pigment paintings that I used to do also on walls, and then painting on the walls. These are just different situations with pigment or with paint and different considerations. And it's interesting how the notions of virtual can happen in each of these different experiences, different temporalities. And that's just the nature of material. But what I love about working with materials is specifically that aspect of distinction and difference. What happens at that moment with that material in this situation, and that's what's exciting. So things can overlap and become different as well.
Thank you for that question, Eileen. The next question is from Folayemi, and they want to know how you define color.
Wow. Color is anything really. I mean, ultimately, I can say it like this. For me, drawing is structural. It's like institute. It becomes equivalent to institution in a sense, if I want to think of it politically. But drawing is structural. It's like skeletal. It's like the bones. It's like the architecture, and then the color as it dresses this body, this grid, as it dresses the lines, as it addresses the institution. It has this ability to transform, change, and misshape it, change it to something else, make it become something else. So, in a way, color is the freedom of spirit or freedom within this institutional structural space called drawing. Drawing and color need to come together, they have to be together. Drawing is only as beautiful as drawing is. And we can understand drawing in so many ways, but as beautiful as drawing is, for me, it becomes activated when color is engaging it. And color can engage to the point of disappearing what was there before and making it something new. And that is part of this idea of where I see color being a space of freedom for freedom.
Thank you for that question, Folayemi. Um, the last audience question is from Joe Fife, and they say, was a liner map laid out in advance of the painting?
But yeah, on the drawing, on the wall, it was. On the paper, it is. Again, it's like in the sense of like creating an armature, I need to be able to structure my color and also structure the idea of what the space might be. So let me say that I said in the first wall, there is the idea of the compacted, tight, highly energized combustive space. The second wall, the canopy wall, the drawing was really referential to ways in which I think of my dad's paintings, but also the ways which I think of. For instance, I call that grid the screen. And for me, that screen is this space between here and there. Like, let's say here being here now, and there being aspiration, the spirit world, ancestors, whatnot, and the colors in between being like the color that situates itself as like a calling or conjuring of that spirit manifestation. So let's say that on that particular wall, I did want the idea of my idea of heaven, let's say, but heaven on the day I made the drawing, because heaven tomorrow is going to be something else, right? So that's the also the this magic of this sort of thing of being able to say capturing something and say here now. There's a lot of risk, a lot of faith, a lot of belief that one has to put in themselves to say here now. And that's what we had in in that wall space. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have one final question from Fong. I'm going to let you unmute, Fong.
Thank you, Markley. Thank you, Odili. Thank you,
Thank
Dan.
you, Fong.
Thanks,
Uh,
Fong.
I saw the whole installation twice already, and I'm going back this Saturday again. It's fantastic. You mentioned the column in regard to you and Dan were talking about velocity, and cubism technology and all that. And you mentioned Leonardo. And when I was last in Paris, I made an effort to come and see Ang's beautiful painting of Leonardo dying in the arm of Francis I.
Mm.
It's hard to believe, but when he was there, staying with King Francis I, he made, I believe, 9 or 10 Deluge drawings, basically the last drawings of his life.
Mm.
And considering the chaos, the dominant of nature, unpredictable force, and I don't know whether you were thinking about the luge because there are energy going climbing up from bottom to up the column and go down again. And it's very interesting to see that in regard to all the site-specific installation and different walls there. So that's my number one question, Lily. I have a
Mhm.
second here. The second, given the fact
Oh,
that,
deluge. Yes.
yeah, the luge. The second question is in regard to our beloved friend Jack Whitenshaw.
Hmm.
As you know, Jack has been obsessed with technology, with race, with jazz, as well as love and war, all of it. And it's interesting because I was told that since his deep admiration for Gorky until 1968, 69, I think, that's when he began to realize that he need to stop to making painting in the manner of Gorky or de Kooning. But nevertheless, his love for Gorky remained to the end, very much so. The last time Jack was here, when he got out of the hospital, we talked about our mutual admiration for Gorky, who died so early,
Hmm.
44, I think 1948. So was Leonardo. It's hard to believe he's also died early, 67 years old, you know?
Hmm.
But the fact that Michelle, whether Michelle Core did it or Ann Tamkin did it, they were very much had in mind to be sure the whole entire room of Gorky was up in reference to Jack's own work.
Mm.
And you know how Jack's work is very somber, serious. There's certain gravity of all these things that we mentioned in the work. I wonder if they had in mind to commission you to lighten up the somberness in Jack's work. I don't know. I mean, I just that's a rather artificial reading here, but it was a joy to go through Jack with Richard Shipp, David Reed, and a few other people the other day. We have the whole museum to ourselves, and coming down to see your installation was so joyous experience.
Well, I spent a lot of time looking at that Witten show while preparing for my thing, and and I had a great opportunity to sit with it at a dinner and speak with Michelle Kuo about her curating, which I think is really brilliant. Bringing all the different work, all that the collection of that body of work together, which actually makes it a fuller, impactful engagement and understanding of what this artist did. I understood about the notion of generational focus and interest, that there's we might be seen as Black artists or I mean, Black artists, African artists. He's a Black artist, African American artist. I think that there is something that's very powerful when you understand the generational interest and focus of an artist. And this is a man, Jack Whitten's a man who, we look at the work and I say, this man has experienced death
Mhm.
multiple times. This is what's coming from this work. And I don't mean in a flat and basic way. I mean in an intense way, which he is driven to to push his mind and experimentation to its most extreme end over years,
Mm-hmm.
where you almost wonder if he's addicted to the challenge of transformation and change within the alchemy of his work.
Yeah.
Always experimenting, always pushing. And what you get is a collection, a body of work where this artist has really explored this through a long distance run of
Mm-hmm.
some of the most innovative surfaces, things that are predating artists like Gerhard Richter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like quite amazing, and with difficulty up until the very end, when all of a sudden the world understands this artist and throws all its money at him, but he's only experiencing that toward the end of his long life. But
Mm-hmm.
he's a man who also, as much as that work sits there, he's an artist who, Stanley Whitney has told me this, an artist who understands what it meant to live well and taught that to other artists. And I'm talking about living well in the sense of being educated, working at institutions, going to educational institutions, universities, going and building a home in Greece and having a second studio there and taking his family back and forth and living the highest quality of life that one could experience within one's means.
Yes.
And that's really important because being an artist is really hard.
Mm-hmm.
People look at the fact, you can look at Vogue magazine that just came out and see a bunch of artists, and then you think that that's how they live. Artists don't live like that. You know what I mean? Really, they
Yeah.
don't live. That's just there, right?
That's
Yeah.
just Vogue.
Yeah, just Vogue, right?
Yeah.
It's really difficult to do this and believe in yourself and to do that kind of work that's so well made, so well built, so ambitious, time after time after time in the face of denial, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
even the idea of like being a Black person in America.
Yeah.
We live in a world now in 2025. This is, May. And I'm telling you, we live in a world that seems like we've gone back 50, 60 years with this regime that we have this here. And I can tell you that people are standing up and saying, it's here, but this is not us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that kind of fight is important. It's the kind of fight that Jack shows in his work, that Stanley shows in his work. There are a lot of artists right now in this podcast here, my old teachers, people, colleagues I work with, they show in their work where it's like you, we believe in something different and we believe in something better. And even if the world around you is telling you no, you can go out there and say yes. And it's not going to be pretty. That's the
Mm-hmm.
word you told me, Dan, when I was like really nervous about stuff way, way, way back. It's not going to be pretty,
Yeah.
but
But
you can do it. And let me add, you can do it better. Better part is not a guarantee, but that's what we try for.
Boy, I asked two questions and you answered none of it and went into this incredible poetic defense of art. Well, it's true uh, that Jack was determined to make abstraction. He's not going to make narrative painting to reveal his own struggle, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
And that was a huge influence, important, profound, reassurance for Stanley. Because when Stanley came to New York, the first Black artist he wanted to meet was Bob Thompson.
Mhm.
But Bob Thompson died the year that he came.
Mhm.
So he didn't have anyone to look and meet. So except for Jack and few other, of course, he got to know everybody. But it's so important to have that confidence in an artist who decidedly to surrender himself to abstraction, even though everyone was going against what he was doing at the time. And it's interesting, right after Black Lives Matter erupt, we had a gathering here where everyone was asked, given an update in regard to what happened. And Stanley says something very interesting. He say, I painted right through the civil rights movement. I paint right through the Vietnam War, and I'm going to paint right through Black Lives Matter.
Mhm.
So it's that's a choice one made. You can mediate through your own freedom, practice through your own work. You don't have to always go out there and protest. That's also a very important option for people, artists or writer and poet. We have to respect that too. So that's super important, and not conforming them and putting pressure on them to be part of the mass, because the mass can be maddening of the frenzy of emotionality, and that can happen to the left or the right, either way. But anyway, Odili, I'm coming back this Saturday, and I'm meeting you there too, I think.
Yeah, we're meeting on Thursday.
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 Okay, great.
Okay.
We have another discussion.
Okay.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Odili, thank you, Dan, and back to you, Mackley.
Thank you so
Thank
much for that question, Fong. And thank you, Dan and Odili, for such a wonderful conversation. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can find on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 24 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Malu Dalla Piccola and Ginevra de Blasio on the occasion of Have You Already Been Here at El Museo de Antropología de Jalapa. And as is Rail tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Magley.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much.
everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
Thank
Maggie.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Odili.
Thank you so
Thank you, Dan.
much.
Wonderful conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Odili.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you, Odili. Congratulations, Odili.
Thank you.
Go see the show, everybody, at MoMA. Run the entrance. You cannot miss it.
You can't miss it.
Can't miss it. No. Even when even the day free.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I see you on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody,
Bye,
for
everybody.
today.
Bye.
Thank you.